Welcome, traveler. Tonight we step into a world shaped by ancient winds and firelit halls, where gods and giants walked beneath northern stars. As you listen, let your body grow still and your breathing soften. Set aside the weight of your day and allow your worries to fade like mist in the morning sun. We will journey through Norse mythology together, exploring cosmic trees, thunderous gods, and stories whispered across centuries. Settle somewhere warm and comfortable. Let your eyes grow heavy, and let the gentle rhythm of these old tales guide you toward rest. This is a story of creation and chaos, of courage and destiny, woven through time like threads of starlight. When you're ready, close your eyes, let go, and drift with me into the mythic north. Let us begin. In the beginning, before time took shape and before the worlds were born, there was only a yawning nothingness known as Ginnungagap, an endless void stretching between two primordial realms. To the north lay Niflheim, a place of ice, frost, and biting cold that carved the emptiness like frozen claws. To the south lay Muspelheim, a land of roaring fire and molten chaos. When the icy breath of Niflheim met the scorching sparks of Muspelheim in the heart of Ginnungagap, they swirled together and gave birth to the first giant, Ymir, whose massive form slept in the darkness. From the melting frost also emerged the cosmic cow Audumla, whose gentle tongue licked salty ice blocks. From those blocks, over days carved by patient licks, emerged Buri, the first of the gods. Ymir drank the nourishing milk of Audumla while his sweat gave life to the first frost giants who crawled from under his arms and knees. Soon Buri fathered Bor, who in turn fathered three gods, Odin, Vili, and Ve. These three brothers grew troubled by Ymir's primal chaos. They conspired and slew the giant, and from his immense corpse they crafted the world. His blood became oceans, his flesh became land, his bones mountains, his hair forests, and his skull became the vast dome of the sky. Sparks from Muspelheim became stars, jewels hung across the night like silent watchers. With their world shaped, Odin and his brothers roamed the raw new earth. From two fallen logs on a sandy shore, they crafted the first humans. Odin gifted them breath and life, Vili gave them reason and intelligence, and Ve granted them appearance and speech. They were named Ask and Embla, and the gods set them to live within Midgard, the realm of humankind, surrounded by a great wall of Ymir's eyelashes to protect them from giants who lurked hungrily beyond. Above Midgard lay Asgard, the celestial stronghold of the gods, linked to the world of humans by Bifrost, the shimmering rainbow bridge guarded always by the watchful Heimdall, whose keen senses allowed him to hear grass growing and see hundreds of leagues in the distance. The gods, known as the Aesir, made their home in golden halls. Among them was Odin Allfather and god of wisdom, war and poetry, who sacrificed his eye for knowledge and hung 9 nights on the world tree Yggdrasil to learn the secret runes. Beside him was his brother Thor, red-bearded and mighty, whose hammer Mjolnir cracked thunder across heavens and smashed giants wherever they threatened to upset cosmic order. Loki also lived among them, a mischievous trickster born of giant blood, yet bound by ancient oaths to Odin. Quick with wit and fingers, Loki meddled in matters of gods and mortals alike, sometimes helping and sometimes harming with the same playful grin. Yggdrasil, the cosmic ash tree, held the worlds like a spine of reality. In its branches perched an eagle, and at its roots gnawed the dragon Nidhogg. Between them scurried the squirrel Ratatoskr, carrying insults to keep their rivalry sharp. In the halls of Asgard, the gods debated fates and feasts, drinking mead brewed by dwarves beneath the earth. These dwarves, called Dvergar, forged miraculous treasures that defined destiny itself, such as Odin's spear Gungnir and Thor's hammer Mjolnir. They worked in caverns lit by molten ore, crafting things that shimmered like sunrise through crystal. Many of these wonders came to be through Loki's antics, often after he found himself in trouble. One such tale began when Loki cut the golden hair of Sif, Thor's beloved. To avoid thunderous vengeance, he promised to replace it with hair finer than before. he traveled to the dwarves who forged strands of spun gold, weaving them magically into Sif's head so they flowed and grew like real locks. There were many halls in Asgard. Perhaps most famous of all was Valhalla, Odin's grand chamber where slain warriors, chosen by Valkyries soaring through battlefields, trained endlessly for the world's final fight. These chosen heroes, called Einherjar, feasted at night and fought by day, rising anew without blemish. Thus they prepared for Ragnarök, the twilight of the gods, a future foretold by seers and runes carved in bone and stone. But until that fate arrived, the daily life of gods flowed like a river of small joys, frustrations, and strange adventures. One day, a giant named Thrym stole Thor's mighty hammer and demanded the goddess Freya as his bride in exchange. Loki, ever cunning, helped Thor disguise himself as a bride, veil and all. At the wedding feast, Thor's voracious appetite nearly betrayed him, and only Loki's quick lies saved the ruse. When the hammer was finally placed on Thor's lap to bless the union, he tore off his disguise and crushed the giants with victorious thunder. Freya herself was a goddess of love, beauty, and satyr magic, riding a chariot pulled by cats and wearing the dazzling necklace Brisingamen, forged by dwarven hands. She belonged to the Vanir, an older tribe of gods associated with fertility and nature. There had once been war between the Aesir and the Vanir, driven by suspicion, misunderstandings, and pride. But after long conflict, they traded hostages and forged peace. Njord of the Vanir came to live among the Aesir with his children Freyr and Freya. Freya would one day rule over prosperity and peace, while Njord governed wind and seas. Though peace was sealed, not everything was harmonious. Odin's thirst for knowledge took him even to the realm of the dead, where he consulted the Völva, a powerful seeress. She told him of a distant doom, a burning future where the sun would dim, the wolf Fenrir would break free, and the world would drown beneath waves and fire. Odin's heart grew heavy, for though he was wise, he could not outrun fate. Meanwhile, Loki's complicated life grew ever darker. He fathered monstrous children with the giantess Angerboda, the wolf Fenrir, the serpent Jormungandr, and Hel, ruler of the dead. Alarmed by prophecies declaring their destructive roles, the gods sought to control them. They hurled Jormungandr into the ocean, where he grew until his body encircled the world. They sent Hel to the underworld, where she ruled over those who died, not in battle, but of illness, age, and misfortune. And Fenrir, too dangerous to roam freely, was chained by the gods. The wolf snapped each fetter they forged until the dwarves crafted Gleipnir, a magical ribbon soft as silk but strong beyond measure. Lured to test it, Fenrir grew suspicious and demanded that one god place a hand in his mouth as a token of trust. Tyr, god of law and sacrifice, bravely complied. When Fenrir found he could not break free, he bit Tyr's hand clean off, sealing both their fates. Balder, son of Odin and Frigg, was beloved by all, bright and fair, gentle and wise. His dreams foretold his own death. Terrified, Frigg traveled the 9 realms, demanding oaths from every object not to harm her son, from metal and stone, beasts and trees, fire and water. All objects vowed safety, and the gods, emboldened, took to playfully throwing weapons at Balder, who stood unharmed and laughing. But overlooked by Frigg was the humble mistletoe, seen as too small and young to swear an oath. Loki learned this secret. He fashioned a dart of mistletoe and handed it to Hodr, Balder's blind brother, guiding his aim in cruel trickery. The dart flew true, striking Balder dead. The gods wept, the heavens darkened, and the world trembled. Odin rode to Hel's realm to plead for his son's return. Hel agreed to free Balder if every creature wept for him. All did, except a giantess who refused, believed to be Loki in disguise. Thus Balder remained in Hel's cold halls, and the chains of fate tightened. After this terrible act, the gods seized Loki. They bound him in a cavern, tying him with the entrails of his own son, transformed into unbreakable iron. Above him they hung a serpent that dripped venom on his face. His wife Sigyn held a bowl to catch the poison, but when she emptied it, drops would land, sending Loki writhing in agony. Earthquakes shook Midgard whenever Loki twisted against his bonds, and so he remained imprisoned until the end of days. Yet life went on. Seasons flowed like ocean waves, and Midgard's humans grew, fought, loved, and died under the watch of unseen gods. Sometimes Thor journeyed to Jotunheim, battling giants who threatened to upset the balance of the worlds. Sometimes Odin wandered in disguise among mortals, testing their hospitality, rewarding kindness and punishing cruelty. Shield maidens trained as fiercely as men, and skalds sang sagas around mead-filled halls, praising heroes whose deeds echoed across generations. But prophecy is relentless. When the signs of Ragnarök began, wolves chased the sun and moon, swallowing light. Winter stretched 3 years without summer. Brothers killed brothers, and chaos consumed the bonds of kinship. The rooster Gullinkambi crowed in Asgard, another crowed in Jotunheim, and a third in Hel's realm, each sounding an alarm to gods, giants, and the dead. Loki broke free from his chains, joining forces with giants and Hellspawn. Fenrir's jaws stretched wide enough to swallow the world. Jormungandr rose from the sea, thrashing waves onto land. Naglfar, a ship made from the nails of the dead, sailed with an army of the damned. Fire giants, led by Surtur blazing like a sun, marched across Bifrost, shattering the Rainbow Bridge. Heimdall sounded Gjallarhorn with a blast that shook the cosmos, and the Aesir gathered for their final stand on the plain of Vigrid. Odin rode to face Fenrir but was swallowed whole. Thor battled Jormungandr and slew the serpent, only to stumble 9 steps before falling dead from its venom. Freya fought Surtur bravely, though he lacked his magical sword, and perished beneath flames. Tyr clashed with the hound Garm, and both fell. Loki faced Heimdall, and they dealt death to each other in grim silence. Surtur swept fire across the worlds, burning forests, halls, and even the branches of Yggdrasil. Oceans boiled, mountains crumbled, and the sky collapsed. Smoke choked the air, and the stars vanished. It seemed all creation had been reduced to ash and darkness. Yet from this ruin came silence, and in silence came renewal. Slowly, gently, green shoots pushed through charred soil. Rivers flowed with clear water again. A new sun rose, the daughter of the old one. Among this reborn world, 2 humans emerged from the sheltering wood named Lif and Lifthrasir, who had survived by hiding in Yggdrasil's trunk. Nourished by dew, they became the ancestors of a future humankind. Some gods too returned or survived. Balder rose from Hel's realm, shining with hope. The sons of Thor picked up their father's hammer. Fields blossomed without sowing seeds, and harmony settled over the land. The cycle of death and rebirth continued, a rhythm echoing the pulse of the universe. Across Midgard, people told these stories on cold nights and shared them by firelight, passing them from tongue to tongue through centuries. They spoke of the Norns, the weavers of fate, sitting at the roots of Yggdrasil, carving destinies into wood and watching the flow of time like water over stones. They whispered of Alfar, light elves dwelling in beauty, and dark elves forging cunning crafts in hidden caverns. They honored ancestors and believed that valor in life shaped one's path in death. These myths guided how people lived, loved, fought, and feared. Heroes like Sigurd slew dragons, and shield maidens carved their fates into fame. Kings traced their lineages to gods, and skalds rewarded generosity with poems that immortalized deeds more surely than stone. When storms raged across the sea, sailors prayed to Njord. When harvests flourished, farmers thanked Freyr. Their world was never far from divine influence. In time, the old religion shifted as new beliefs arrived, but the tales never truly vanished. They transformed, sleeping like embers beneath snow. Generations later, poets, scholars, and dreamers rediscovered them in ancient texts like the Poetic Edda and the Prose Edda. These works, written long after the Viking Age, preserved fragments of a once living tradition, cryptic poems hinting at mysteries already fading from memory, prose narratives weaving meaning from scattered myths. Even now the stories endure, inspiring books, art, music, and imagination. They remind us that creation and destruction coexist, that wisdom demands sacrifice, and that even gods cannot outrun destiny. They speak of cycles, winter turning to spring, life yielding to death, and worlds reborn from ashes. They invite us to ponder courage, loyalty, betrayal, grief, and hope. As you listen, imagine the crackle of a fire, the rustle of wind through pine trees, and the shimmering aurora above frost-tipped mountains. Imagine longships cutting through black oceans, legendary beasts slumbering beneath waves, and thunder rolling across cloud-wreathed peaks. Hear the distant echo of Gjallarhorn, and feel the soft hush of new-grown leaves after the storm. These mythic threads are woven into human history, not only as entertainment but as mirrors reflecting our fears and dreams. We may never stand face to face with giants nor battle world serpents, but we grapple with struggles inside ourselves, in our societies, and in our uncertain futures. The Norse believed that even knowing the outcome, fighting for what is right still matters. There is something noble about defying fate with dignity. They held that the world may burn, but life will rise again. And so the story continues, living wherever curiosity stirs. Perhaps in quiet moments, you will recall Odin's search for knowledge, Thor's strength tempered by loyalty, Loki's cleverness twisted by ego, Baldur's purity and Sigin's devotion. Perhaps you will remember the lesson of Ragnarök, that nothing stays unchanged, yet endings birth beginnings. And maybe, as sleep approaches gently, you will feel that same ancient comfort that countless generations felt under starlit skies, knowing that myths are not merely tales, they are guardians of wisdom, wrapped in the warmth of storytelling, waiting patiently for listeners such as you. And so as new dawns rose over the whispered edges of Midgard, the echoes of ancient tales drifted like mist over valleys and fjords, and people found themselves drawn towards stories of old heroes whose names shimmered like runes carved into memory. One such hero was Sigurd, born of noble blood and destined for greatness, raised under the guidance of the dwarf Regin, who taught him the art of war and the secrets of metal. Regin spoke often of Fafnir, once a man but twisted by greed into a monstrous dragon who guarded cursed gold with venomous breath. Determined to slay the beast, Sigurd reforged the shattered sword Gram, a blade so sharp it cut anvils in half, and dug a trench along the dragon's path. When Fafnir slid above him, Sigurd struck upward, piercing scale and heart. As the dying serpent writhed, its blood soaked the earth. Against warning, Sigurd tasted it and suddenly understood the language of birds, who whispered that Regin planned his betrayal. With swift justice, Sigurd struck his teacher down, claiming the gold but not peace, for the treasure's curse brought ruin to all who touched it. He rode his horse Grani across kingdoms, performing deeds recited in smoky halls, until envy and treachery sealed his fate. Love and tragedy followed him closely, especially in his fateful meeting with Brynhild, a Valkyrie punished by Odin to slumber within fire, until a worthy hero awakened her, only for tangled destinies to drive them apart and end in heartbreak. Far to the icy north dwelled Skadi, a giantess whose father was slain by the gods. Consumed by grief, she armed herself and marched to Asgard alone, demanding justice. The gods, unwilling to wage war, offered compensation. She would choose a husband by seeing only his feet. Hoping for Baldur, she instead chose Njord, god of the sea, whose smooth feet came from walking on soft shores. Their marriage suffered, for Skadi loved the high mountains, and Njord could not bear the biting cold. Though they tried to live together, spending time by sea and peak, neither could find comfort in the other's realm. And yet, despite everything, their story was not of hatred but acceptance, a gentle lesson that love sometimes blooms but does not root. Meanwhile, Freya, god of peace and fertility, once sat on Odin's high throne and saw Gerd, a frost giantess radiant as sunrise over snow, Love struck him so deeply that he gave away his sword, a weapon he would one day need at Ragnarök. It was a sacrifice for a single spark of warmth in a cold world. Love, the Norse believed, is worth the wounds it leaves. Beneath the waves dwelled Aesir, lord of the sea, whose underwater hall hosted feasts where goblets never emptied and laughter rose like bubbles. His massive cauldron once brewed mead for the gods, obtained only after Thor endured many trials. Yet the Sea Lord's smiles held thunder within, for the ocean is both nurturing and devouring, a shifting mood no mortal can tame. Sailors prayed to him, knowing one moment's favor could become the next moment's fury. In stormy skies, people spoke of the wild hunt, a spectral procession led by Odin on winter nights, riders and hounds howling across clouds like tearing wind. Mortals trembled at the sight, for it meant upheaval, the turning of seasons, spirits chasing the lost. Storms, they said, were echoes of hooves on unseen fields, and in the world below, dwarves worked in hidden forges, their hammers sending sparks through darkness as they crafted treasures bound with magic, rings of power, enchanted hair, weapons that shaped fate, sometimes cunning, sometimes noble. Dwarves mirrored humanity's complexity, shifting with each tale. Across forests lived the Huldufolk, hidden folk who dwelled beneath hills and stones. They were kind to those who respected their land and cruel to those who plowed sacred ground. Farmers left bowls of milk and offerings of bread, whispering blessings to unseen neighbors, for the world is full of eyes beyond our sight. On battlefield edges roared berserkers, warriors who wore wolf and bear skins and fought in frenzy, channeling animal spirits to protect their clans. Feared and revered, their howls chilled the spine, yet such power came with heavy toll, scorching the soul that held it. Wandering the villages were Volva and seers, carving runes into wood and bone, reading fate like stars. Their words guided kings and farmers alike, for knowledge of tomorrow shapes the courage of today. Yet even they bowed to the Norns, who wove destinies at Yggdrasil's roots. Neither cruel nor merciful, they simply were, steady as rivers cutting stone. Daily life in Midgard echoed with these beliefs. Hospitality stood as sacred law, for any traveler could be Odin in disguise, testing hearts. In smoky halls, skalds chanted sagas to the beat of drums, voices lifting like embers. Children leaned forward, breath held, learning through myth what laws could not teach. At funerals, ships burned or treasures were buried to guide souls to their next realm. Valkyries descended on battlefields like shimmering hawks, lifting brave spirits to Valhalla, where they fought and feasted until Ragnarok's call. Others took gentler paths to Hell's quiet realm, a place of rest rather than torment. Death was not an end, but a winter before spring. Centuries passed, and new faiths washed over northern shores. The old gods faded into twilight, but their shadows lingered in lullabies, carvings, names, and stories whispered under starlight. Scholars later unearthed fragments from ancient manuscripts, piecing together sagas like shattered pottery, knowing some secrets were lost forever. Yet myths are living things, shaped by every voice that tells them. Today their spirits linger in books, games, music, films, and dreams. We see ourselves reflected in Odin's sacrifice for knowledge, Thor's fierce duty, Loki's questioning of order, Freya's shimmering mystery, Hel's acceptance of endings, and Baldur's return as hope reborn. When storms shake windows, imagine Thor's hammer crashing. When chaos rises, hear Loki's laughter curling in cracks. When curiosity tempts, recall Odin's missing eye. And when sorrow feels heavy, remember Baldur's return after darkness. So as you breathe gently, let these tales settle like snow on pine branches, quiet and soft. Feel the hum of Yggdrasil threading through your pulse, ancient roots grounding you. Even as sleep drifts near, the myths continue spinning in the dark, weaving wonder and memory into dreams echoing with footsteps of gods. Beyond the tales of gods and monstrous beasts, daily life in the old northern world held a quieter magic woven through every gesture and breath. Farmers rose before dawn to tend fields that clung stubbornly to rocky soil, whispering small prayers to Freya for gentle rain and rich harvest. Children gathered berries in forests where sunlight filtered like liquid gold through pines, always mindful of hidden folk who watched from hollow trees. At long tables crafted from ancient oak, families shared stew, bread, and laughter, bound by kinship as tightly as any saga hero bound by destiny. In winter, nights stretched endlessly, and people gathered around fires to hear elders speak of ages long before time was counted. Sparks lifted into the rafters like tiny souls, and in those moments the boundary between mortal hearth and mythic realm seemed as thin as smoke itself. Wolves howled beyond the village edge, eyes glowing like embers, reminders of Fenrir's wild blood dwelling in every shadow. Yet fear was met not with despair but with strength, for courage was a virtue praised as loudly as valor. Traders journeyed along icy seas, their longships cutting through black water, sails swelling with wind that smelled of salt and adventure. At distant markets they bartered amber, furs, and iron for silks, spices, and stories. Each tale they brought home wove another thread into the rich tapestry of culture, for knowledge was treasure equal to gold. And wherever travelers roamed, the presence of Odin was never far, cloaked in mystery, testing the hearts of strangers with riddles and hidden wisdom. Craft and ritual played vital roles in shaping this world. Blacksmiths hammered iron into weapons, tools, and runes, believing that metal held memory of fire's ancient rage. They whispered charms over glowing steel, binding spirit and purpose into each blade. Nearby, rune masters carved symbols into wood and bone, their lines sharp as moonlit frost. These runes were not mere letters, but living forces, each carrying weight of meaning and consequence. A single stroke carved wrongly could twist fate like tangled thread. In sacred groves dedicated to the Vanir, offerings of grain, honey, and wine were poured into the earth, nourishing unseen roots of cosmic harmony. Festivals unfolded beneath the moon, where dancing feet drummed rhythms into soil, echoing the heartbeat of Yggdrasil. Songs and drums pulsed with ancient power, reminding mortals that joy itself was a sacred act. And among warriors, oaths were spoken over mead horns, each vow bound by honor stronger than steel. Breaking such an oath was a stain upon one's name, lasting beyond death. Thus reputation mattered, echoed by skalds who preserved deeds in verse. A noble name lived forever in song, a dishonored one dissolved like mist at dawn. Voyagers seeking new horizons pushed their ships farther west than any before them, braving storms, hostile shores, and unknown seas. In sagas, they encountered lands rich with towering forests and rivers swarming with fish, places scholars now trace to distant continents. These explorers carried not only axes and shields, but myths and traditions that mingled with new worlds. Yet the ocean was never merely a path. It was alive, full of spirits, tempests, and whispers. Sailors offered carved tokens to the waves, hoping a gear would guide them safely. They watched the horizon carefully, for the silhouette of Jormungandr might break the waters at any time. When lightning split the sky, they muttered Thor's name, trusting his hammer to fend off chaos. To these seafarers, every journey was a thread woven into destiny's loom, and returning home was both triumph and rebirth. Warm embraces at the docks told stories of relief deeper than any saga's roar. Fires were lit, feasts prepared, and children stared wide-eyed at the trophies and tales their elders brought home. Through such tales, courage was taught not as recklessness, but as willingness to face storms both outside and within. In quieter moments, when snow drifted gently across frozen earth, people contemplated the nature of life, death, and the unseen. They believed the world was held together by respect for gods, ancestors, and the natural balance. To break that balance invited misfortune. Dreams were studied carefully, for they were bridges between waking world and spirit realm. A dream of ravens might bring warning, for Odin's birds Hugin and Munin flew across thought and memory. A dream of blooming fields in winter might promise unexpected fortune. Shamans performed seder, bending threads of possibility, singing incantations that rippled through the fabric of fate. Their staffs rattled with bones and feathers, symbols of journeys through realms unseen. Though feared by some, seder wielders carried wisdom others lacked, and many sought their counsel when uncertainty clouded the heart. In dim torchlight, their eyes reflected deep truths, like wells that had seen countless moons rise and fall. And always, beneath every ritual and whisper, lay the quiet understanding that existence was cyclical. Winter always melted into spring, old fires gave way to new flames, and the world would continue turning beneath the watchful branches of Yggdrasil. As centuries passed and kingdoms shifted like drifting snow, the myths of the North adapted, breathing through the mouths of new generations. Skalds traveled from hall to hall, their cloaks heavy with story, their voices rising and falling like ocean waves. Each performance was both entertainment and preservation, ensuring that gods and heroes would not fade into silence. In smoky longhouses, chieftains leaned forward, listening closely as sagas unfurled. Children clutched blankets, eyes wide, absorbing every detail as though legends were nourishment. These stories were not merely diversions. They were mirrors reflecting virtues such as loyalty, generosity, and bravery. Through them, people learned to face hardship with resilience, to trust in community when storms howled outside their doors. Even so, variations emerged. One village might say Loki tricked a frost giant with clever words, while another claimed he used illusion and fire. Such differences were not errors but signs of living tradition, shaped gently by the tongues that carried it. As people migrated, these tales flowed with them, like rivers threading through new landscapes, watering the imagination of lands far from their origin. Yet a great shift loomed on the horizon, carried by missionaries and kings who spoke of one god instead of many. The old ways did not collapse in a sudden clash, but rather dimmed slowly like embers losing heat. Some embraced the new faith with hopeful hearts, drawn to promises of salvation and unity. Others clung fiercely to the beliefs of their forefathers, guarding sacred groves and whispered prayers. Between these viewpoints lay a space of quiet tension, where identity wavered, uncertain which direction to follow. In some halls, wooden idols were burned or broken, their ash scattered to winds that had long served as messengers between realms. But in others, symbols of the new quietly stood beside charms of the old, an uneasy truce that lasted generations. Skalds adapted again, weaving threads of Christian virtue into northern tales, blending worlds like a craftsman joining wood and iron. The myths did not vanish. They shifted shape, carried into manuscripts by scholars who saw value in preserving them. Though the gods no longer received offerings at winter feasts, their names lingered in place, names, customs, and the quiet reverence for nature's cycles. Through time's passage, the tales of the Norse slumbered like seeds beneath snow, awaiting the warmth of curiosity to bloom again. Scholars in distant libraries pored over manuscripts, marveling at the raw power of the sagas. Artists found inspiration in Thor's thunderous might, Odin's cryptic wisdom, and the fierce unpredictability of Loki. The modern world, shaped by science and reason, still felt the pull of ancient wonder. Festivals resurrected old customs where people danced around fires wearing garments reminiscent of distant ancestors. Children swung wooden swords pretending to be warriors of longships and stormy seas. At museums, artifacts glowed softly behind glass. The dull shine of a sword, the intricate knotwork of a brooch, the weathered grain of carved wood. Visitors leaned close, imagining the hand that once held each object, the heartbeat that pulsed behind it. Scholars debated details, filling pages with interpretations, while storytellers breathed new life into familiar characters. The myths, though ancient, remained curiously fresh, like echoes returning across a vast canyon. They offered escape, wisdom, and the comforting reminder that even in chaos, purpose can be found. Meanwhile, on distant cinematic screens and in digital realms, echoes of the old gods found new forms. Heroes wielded hammers crackling with lightning, tricksters danced through shadows with cunning smiles, and serpents coiled around skyscrapers instead of mountains. Though dramatized and reshaped for modern audiences, the core themes endured: courage against overwhelming odds, consequences of broken oaths, and the fragile beauty of balance. For some viewers, these stories were simply thrilling adventures. For others, they awakened a deeper curiosity that led them back to runes and sagas. Podcasts, documentaries, and books multiplied, guiding curious minds through tangled branches of myth like friendly ravens. Online forums buzzed with questions, theories, and comparisons, transforming the ancient oral tradition into digital dialogue. Through every medium, the gods refused to be forgotten. They adapted once more, proving that old stories thrive not by remaining unchanged, but by evolving. In quiet moments, someone might step outside on a cold night, breath hanging in the air like drifting spirit, and gaze at the northern sky. Stars shimmer across a darkness as though tiny runes carved by cosmic hands. The vastness inspires a feeling both humbling and hopeful, echoing the awe felt by ancestors long ago. Perhaps in the hush between heartbeats, one might imagine the faint creak of Yggdrasil's branches or the distant roar of unseen waves. It is in these moments that myth stirs, not as fantasy but as a whisper of something timeless, lodged deep within human longing. Because myth, at its heart, is not about proving the existence of gods. It is about understanding ourselves, our fears, our hopes, our capacity to destroy, and our yearning to create. Through Thor's hammer, we see our desire to protect. Through Loki's chaos, we confront our own shadows. Through Odin's sacrifice, we glimpse the price of wisdom. And through the coming twilight of Ragnarök, we face the inevitability of endings, balanced by the promise of renewal. As the wheel of fate continued turning, whispers of a final age drifted upon cold winds. The gods, though mighty and wise, sensed an unrest deep within the roots of Yggdrasil. Ravens perched restlessly on branches, feathers puffed against invisible tension. Wolves prowled at forest edges, their eyes shimmering with ancient hunger. Mortals felt it too, though they could not name it, a subtle trembling in the world, like distant thunder. Prophecies spoke of Ragnarök, a twilight not only of gods but of everything woven into the fabric of existence. Though the gods carried on with rites and feasts, their voices sometimes faltered when singing of glory. They looked to one another with flickers of doubt, quickly hidden behind laughter. Odin the All-Father wandered more often, seeking knowledge in forgotten corners, whispering with spirits of the dead. His single eye pierced veils of possibility, searching for any thread that might alter destiny's loom. But fate in the Norse world was not a path to be escaped. It was a river that carried all souls toward their appointed shores. When the time finally approached, the signs were unmistakable. The bonds that held Fenrir began to weaken, quivering like frayed rope. Deep beneath the waves, Jormungandr stirred, scales scraping against ocean's floor like grinding stone. Skies darkened as winters refused to end, seasons blending into endless cold. Crops withered, and hunger gnawed at the edges of mortal villages. Brothers turned against brothers, swords flashing where once hands embraced. The moral fabric of humanity unraveled, loosened by fear and desperation. Yggdrasil itself trembled, leaves falling like shards of emerald glass. Panic spread among beasts and birds, a chaotic dance of instinct. Then came the sound, a horn blast so vast that mountains echoed. Heimdall's Gjallarhorn split the sky, its note reaching every realm, shaking halls of gold and caverns of frost. Gods sprang to arms, their faces set with grim resolve. They didn't pretend victory was assured, but duty called them like flame to a moth's wing. They marched to the plain of Vigrid, boots striking earth that seemed to bleed shadow. And there, destiny awaited them like an old friend whose embrace was both comforting and merciless. The battle erupted with fury beyond mortal imagining. Thor faced Jormungandr as lightning cracked open heavens. His hammer soared, each blow creating storms that raged across worlds. Serpent venom hissed through the air, scorching soil, and rivers boiled under its touch. In another corner of the field, Odin met Fenrir, who towered like a living shadow, jaws wide enough to swallow stars. The wolf lunged and steel flashed, but fate had spoken long ago. Elsewhere, Freya confronted the giant Surtur, whose flames billowed brighter than suns. Freyr's sword, once traded for love, was absent, leaving him vulnerable. Sparks flew as the two clashed, and fire began licking at the edges of the cosmos. Heimdall and Loki found each other through the chaos, two forces destined to collide. Their blades met like clashing destinies, neither yielding, each knowing that this dance could only end one way. All around them, gods and giants fell, their stories swirling into the dust, their legacies carried like embers upon wind. The sky burned, oceans surged, and the earth cracked open, revealing molten fury beneath. As the final strokes of battle fell, the world succumbed to flame and flood. Mountains crumbled like sandcastles beneath a rising tide, and forests were devoured by fire's hungry breath. The heavens shook as stars tumbled from their thrones, streaking across sky like tears of light. Surtur raised his burning sword high, and with a sweeping arc set the world ablaze. Flames roared like the voices of 1,000 ancient beasts, devouring everything in their path. Heat consumed cold, light swallowed shadow, and an unbearable silence followed the chaos, a silence so deep it felt like the universe itself inhaled and held its breath. But beneath the ashes, in the deepest roots of Yggdrasil, life clung stubbornly. Seeds slept in darkness, dreaming of sunlight. The cosmic tree, though scorched, did not fall. Its branches smoldered gently, glowing like embers that refused to die. For endings in Norse myth were never truly final. Destruction paved the way for awakening as cycles turned endlessly, echoing the truth that nothing remains unchanged. When the fires cooled and smoke drifted across shattered horizons, a gentle breeze stirred the ashes. From hidden groves emerged two humans, Lif and Lifthrasir, names meaning life and eager for life. They blinked at the new dawn, unburdened by the old world's sorrows. Light spilled over ruins, shimmering with promise. Streams trickled once more, their waters tasting of renewal. Green shoots pierced blackened soil, fearless and tender. In distant skies, gods reborn or newly risen stepped cautiously upon fresh earth. Balder, once slain by mistletoe's deceit, walked again, his presence radiating peace. The surviving divine beings gathered, their hearts heavy with memory but hopeful for what could be built anew. They discovered golden game pieces in the grass, symbols of play, of innocence returned. Like children, they knelt and touched them, marveling at simple beauty. Yggdrasil stretched its limbs, leaves unfurling like soft sighs. The cosmos exhaled, releasing tension held since the first whisper of prophecy. And in that gentle air a new story began, its pages blank, waiting for hands to write their futures upon them. Legends of Ragnarök remind listeners that no matter how mighty, all things must confront endings. Yet they also whisper that endings are not void, but fertile ground. Each life, each myth, each world rises, falls, and rises again. These ancient stories travel across seas of time, to reach modern ears not as bleak warnings, but as quiet lanterns guiding us through our own darkness. When we face loss, we remember that renewal waits patiently. When chaos shakes us, we steady ourselves with courage. In storms, we hear Thor's thunder, reminding us that strength stands firm. In trickery, we glimpse Loki's grin, urging caution and cleverness. And in wisdom's pursuit, we follow Odin's footprints into the unknown. Thus the Norse myths continue, not only in books or screens, but in hearts that recognize universal truths. They teach that bravery is not the absence of fear, but action despite it. That loyalty binds stronger than steel. That every life, no matter how small, contributes to the vast tapestry of existence. And when we look beyond the horizon of endings, we discover beginnings waiting just beyond sight. As the new world settled into its gentle dawn, the realms began to reshape themselves in subtle ways. Rivers carved fresh paths through the softened earth, and forest canopies unfurled like emerald sails reaching toward the warming sun. Animals emerged cautiously from hidden hollows, blinking at a horizon they did not recognize. Yet instinct told them that life would continue. Birds carried seeds in their beaks as they darted through crisp air, scattering potential across the plains and hills. In quiet clearings, saplings took root, promising to grow into mighty oaks whose branches would one day shelter both traveler and tale. Those who watched this rebirth sensed an aura of balance, as though every whisper of wind carried the promise of harmony. And yet, even in peace, echoes of the past lingered like distant chimes. For the memory of fire, thunder, and shadow is not easily forgotten. It lives in the soil, in the water, in the hearts of those who inherit its legacy. Among the gods who returned after the great twilight, Balder shone brightest. His presence brought warmth and tranquility to the newly reborn land, as though light itself had taken human form. Where his footsteps touched the ground, flowers sprang like painted smiles. Those who gazed upon him felt a quiet ease settle in their chests, a comfort like the embrace of a dear friend. Beside him stood other divine figures, some familiar, others altered by the crucible of Ragnarök. Their faces bore lines of grief and wisdom, reminders of trials endured, but their eyes sparkled with a second chance. They gathered near what remained of Yggdrasil's trunk, its bark dark and scarred but pulsing faintly with life. Leaves of soft gold shimmered above them, rustling with secrets of what was and what may yet be. The gods spoke softly of rebuilding, not with ambition or conquest, but with reverence for the delicate balance of creation. Their plan was not forced upon the new world. It grew organically, like ivy upon stone. Mortals, too, awoke into this quiet dawn of fate. Lif and Lifthrasir, the first humans of renewal, explored their surroundings with cautious wonder. They saw rivers glittering like silver ribbons, hills rolling like gentle waves, and skies painted in hues of dawn-lit peach and lavender. They felt the pulse of life beneath their feet, a heartbeat shared with earth itself. Hunger guided them to berries plump with sweetness, roots rich in nourishment. Water from fresh springs tasted of purity, crisp and cool against their tongues. They built shelter from fallen branches and thatch, crafting with instinctive skill as though memory itself had carried through the ashes. At night, they gazed at stars scattered across a clean canvas of darkness, whispering quiet questions they could not yet answer. The constellations above seemed familiar and yet somehow new, as though cosmic artists had redrawn ancient patterns with gentler strokes. When Lif and Lifthrasir dreamed, they saw visions of future generations, villages bustling with laughter, harvest feasts celebrating abundance, and elders sharing the wisdom of seasons. From this first spark of humanity's renewal, life blossomed like a story retold in a kinder voice. Children were born beneath gentle trees, their cries rising into crisp morning air like declarations of hope. Communities formed as families gathered around hearths built from smooth stone and hand-hewn timber. People learned to read the land with patient eyes, planting crops where soil softened and rivers sang. Hunters returned from forests with meat carried respectfully, offering prayers of gratitude to the spirits of the wild. For even in this kinder age, reverence remained. They knew instinctively that survival required harmony rather than dominance. Skilled storytellers rose among them, weaving tales of the old gods, ensuring that memory would not fade. Their voices echoed around warm fires, rhythm steady, tone gentle. They spoke of Odin's sacrifice for runes, Thor's thunderous battles, and the cunning spark of Loki. Children listened wide-eyed, hearts beating faster with each twist of destiny. But the storytellers always ended with reminders of balance, of listening, both to heart and earth. Years rolled forward like slow tides. Villages grew into small towns, and new traditions sprouted from old roots. Music drifted across meadows on summer nights, drums pulsing like the heartbeat of the land. Dancers moved with fluid grace, their steps honoring cycles of growth and rest. Craftsmen shaped wood and metal with quiet patience, carving runes to bless homes against misfortune. Healers brewed teas from fragrant herbs, their knowledge born of careful observation and whispered lessons from the seasons. Scholars studied the stars, charting paths across velvet skies, wondering which patterns foretold harvest or storm, and farmers knelt beside fields at dawn, pressing palms to dew-kissed soil, listening to its silent wisdom. This society did not seek to conquer the world. It sought to understand it. Their greatest strength lay not in sword or spear, but in community, empathy, and humility. When storms rolled in from distant coasts, neighbors gathered in longhouses, sharing food, shelter, and song. Together, they weathered every challenge, building trust like bricks of faith. Yet this tranquil world was not free of mystery. Deep within ancient forests stood groves older than memory, where sunlight barely pierced the thick canopy. Trees twisted into shapes resembling faces, their bark lined like the wrinkles of forgotten elders. Animals circled these places with respectful fear, and travelers sometimes swore. They heard faint whispers drifting from hollow trunks. It was rumored that remnants of old magic slumbered there, bound to soil and root. Some claimed to have glimpsed figures cloaked in moss and shadow, moving silently between trees like spirits of the wood. These beings, neither god nor beast, observed mortals with eyes bright as moonlit rain. They were watchers, guardians of the fragile boundary between worlds. To those who entered with gentle steps, offering flowers or song, the forest returned kindness. Lost travelers might find their path lit by falling leaves that glowed softly like embers. But those who sought to harm or exploit found themselves turned around, wandering endlessly until their intent softened. In distant mountains, echoes of dwarven forges occasionally drifted, faint yet steady. Some believed that ancient smiths had survived beneath stone, continuing to craft wonders for a world reborn. Their hammers rang like solemn bells, each strike forging not only metal, but destiny. Rumors spread of weapons sharper than memory, jewels containing trapped sunlight, and artifacts engraved with runes so powerful that even gods approached with caution. Adventurous souls, fueled by curiosity, embarked on quests to find these hidden holes. Most returned with tales only of winding tunnels and silence, but a few came back changed, eyes gleaming with knowledge they dared not speak. They carried objects wrapped in cloth, treasures kissed by moonlight and mystery. These artifacts were never used frivolously. They were kept safe, revealed only when necessity whispered in quiet urgency. Other stories told of distant seas where waves glimmered like liquid sapphire beneath the sun. Sailors built sleek ships that cut through water like sharpened blades. They traveled to foreign shores, exchanging stories, trinkets, and songs. On nights when the sea grew calm and stars crowded the sky like watchful eyes, sailors swore they saw shapes gliding beneath the waves. Scales shimmered like coins tossed into fountains, and faint melodies drifted through salt-heavy air. These songs lulled even the most restless hearts, promising dreams of warmth and stillness. Some sailors tied charms around their wrists to protect themselves from enchantment, while others welcomed the haunting lullaby, believing it to be a blessing. Such tales spread quickly upon return, igniting imaginations across ports and taverns. Children pressed fishermen for stories, eyes wide and shining, while elders nodded, remembering half-forgotten legends of sea spirits and moonlit dance. Northward, where ice floes stretched like frozen mirrors, explorers ventured with sleds and furs. They discovered towering structures of ice sculpted by wind, their walls glittering like mountains of glass. Within these crystalline halls lived silent beings of frost, their bodies carved from winter's heart. They moved with slow grace, leaving trails of shimmering frost with each step. Though they did not speak, their presence carried meaning. When explorers approached with reverence, the frost beings shared knowledge through images cast in frozen walls, glimpses of storms, migrations, and celestial patterns. But those who entered with greed found themselves trapped within prisons of cold, encased until remorse thawed their hearts. Few dared to return to these frozen sanctuaries, yet the stories remained, whispered by firelight as warnings and wonder. As the generations unfolded, humanity's relationship with magic shifted. No longer did mortals cower at the thought of gods and spirits. They approached these forces with measured respect. Magic became subtle, embedded in everyday acts. A mother humming lullabies infused with protective intention. A craftsman carving symbols of luck into a child's toy. An elder scattering herbs into a fire before winter's first snow. These small rituals bridged the seen and unseen, honoring the cycle that created and destroyed worlds. Even those who did not believe found comfort in tradition, as though ancient wisdom stood quietly at their backs. One evening, beneath a sky painted with ribbons of northern light, a gathering formed near the heart of the realm. Young and old sat upon soft grass, watching curtains of green and purple dance above. Storytellers stood at the center, their cloaks billowing gently in a cool breeze. They began to speak, not of fear, but of continuation. They shared how gods had fallen, risen, and learned, how mortals had endured storms and shadows only to rebuild with patience. Their voices rose and fell like tides, weaving meaning into every syllable. Children leaned against their parents, eyelids growing heavy as warmth from nearby fires wrapped around them. The northern lights flickered brighter as though listening. And when the final words drifted into silence, hearts swelled with quiet understanding. The past was not forgotten. It had become a compass. In the centuries that followed, each generation added threads to the expanding tapestry of myth. Some threads shone with triumph, peaceful harvests, prosperous trade, harmonious festivals. Others darkened in sorrow, storms that uprooted homes, sickness that tested endurance, loss that weighed hearts like stone. But every challenge carved deeper compassion into the soul of humanity. And always, at the edges of settlement, ancient whispers lingered, a rustle in the underbrush, a glimmer of light where no flame burned, a dream of a raven perched on a branch watching patiently. These reminders gently nudged mortals to remain humble, to cherish the fragile balance that sustained them. As centuries drifted into millennia, the stories of this reborn world began to echo across different lands and cultures. Travelers carried tales beyond forests, beyond mountains, beyond seas. Some stories changed shape when they reached foreign ears, adopting new colors, faces, and meanings. Yet their hearts remained intact. Themes of sacrifice, wisdom, and renewal resonated through them like steady drumbeats. And in quiet corners of distant libraries, scholars traced these stories back to root and soil, marveling at the way myth traveled like seeds on wind. Now and then, mortals glimpsed divine figures wandering the world in humble forms. A tall stranger with one eye missing, offering counsel at a crossroads. A red-haired man smiling mischievously as he repaired a broken toy for a crying child. A gentle giant helping farmers reconstruct a barn toppled by a storm. These encounters were fleeting, like dreams upon waking, but those who experienced them felt changed, as though threads of fate had brushed against their skin. They shared their stories carefully, never demanding belief, simply offering them like gifts. Even Yggdrasil, though scarred, thrived once more. Its branches reached into realms unseen, and its roots twisted deep into mysteries that mortals could only faintly grasp. Birds nested among its highest limbs, their songs harmonizing with cosmic wind. Squirrels raced up and down its bark, delivering curious messages between worlds. At its base, a pool shimmered like starlight captured in water. Those brave enough to gaze into its depths saw glimpses of possibility. Paths they might walk, choices yet to be made. The visions were never commands, merely whispers. For fate had softened in this age, granting mortals more freedom to shape their stories. Still, in quiet moments, old prophecies stirred, though not with dread. They hinted that cycles would continue as long as life breathed, that endings would always be followed by beginnings, that destruction, though painful, cleared space for growth. And if ever arrogance began to take root in hearts, reminders would emerge, storms stronger than expected, shadows deeper than usual, nudging wisdom back into place. As dusk settled one calm evening, a storyteller stood atop a hill overlooking a peaceful village. Lanterns glowed softly below, dotting the darkness like fallen stars. Fields swayed gently in evening breezes, and laughter drifted from hearth-lit homes. The storyteller closed their eyes and breathed deeply, letting the scent of earth and smoke fill their senses. Then, with voice soft yet steady, they spoke of the ancient past, the frost, the fire, the thunder, the trickery. They spoke of gods who loved fiercely, fought boldly, suffered deeply. They spoke of mortals who struggled, endured, and grew wise. And as they spoke, the village quieted, listening with reverent hearts. For though many generations had passed, though peace reigned, the old stories still mattered. They taught humility, they taught caution, they taught hope. And when the storyteller's voice finally faded, silence settled like a blanket. Then, one by one, lanterns were extinguished. Children carried dreams into sleep, dreams where lightning danced harmlessly across clouds and ravens perched on branches, whispering riddles of comfort. Adults rested with lighter hearts, knowing that even if storms returned someday, humanity would stand, rebuild, and learn. And so the saga of Norse mythology continued, not as a distant relic, but as a living companion, breathing gently through the ages. As you drift now toward rest, let the echoes of these ancient tales linger softly in your mind. Feel the gentle weight of history settle like a warm blanket across your thoughts. Know that cycles of ending and beginning shape us just as they shaped gods and mortals alike. Wherever you walk, may wisdom guide, courage steady, and wonder accompany each step. Let your worries fade like smoke beneath open sky, and allow peaceful dreams to carry you where starlight glimmers upon quiet seas. For tonight the story rests, and so should you. Sleep well, traveler, until our next tale.